Hi guys, welcome to episode 3 of the RSC podcast. This week's topic is Say It Again, and we'll be speaking to Miss Woodford-Smith and Miss Burgess will also be featuring. Firstly, just to start with, Say It Again. Miss Woodford-Smith, could you just elaborate a little bit more on what that means?
Yeah, so obviously Miss James introduced to you the idea of speak well, write well, and we're thinking about how we embed that across the school to improve our oracy skills, and we've talked about why that's important. So one of the things that we're going to be thinking about is how we might actually say things again to make sure that we are speaking in a way that is expected of us for the environment that we are in. So obviously we're not going to do this right first time. I can hear myself right now saying the word gonna rather than going to. It is something that is completely natural just to speak how we would speak outside of school in the school context. So we're basically going to be practicing, and it will be that your teachers or the other adults will be asking you to say it again when they have heard you say a phrase or a word that is not in standard English or that could be improved to support you and help you develop those oracy skills that we've established are going to be really important, not just in school, but when you leave school as well.
Okay, so you've answered partly one of the questions I was going to ask you, which was why is it important for students to be corrected? But one thing I kind of wanted to ask yourself is, will it damage students' confidence if they're having to be corrected all the time, and how we're going to tackle this?
Yeah, so it's one thing that I've been thinking about actually, because I thought about how I would feel if every time I open my mouth to say something and I've sort of wanted to develop my confidence in speaking, someone then corrected me every time. And I think there are ways of going about it. We're not going to correct every single word that comes out of your mouth when you try and speak. That's not what the purpose is. And I certainly would take the approach that if a student was trying to have a conversation with me, I'm not going to stop them mid-sentence and say, stop, I can't finish hearing what you're saying because I need to correct your grammar or correct what you said. I think it's important that as staff, we listen to what students have said, we respond to what students have said and answer their questions, but then also have a kind of precursor that says, when you said X, actually, could you say it again in a different way that might not use slang, that might use standard English, or that extends what you've said, or that might be said in a way that would be a bit more appropriate for the setting that we're in?
That's a really good answer. I think it happens quite often, not just in the classroom. So you've got, for example, the behaviour support unit. There's some amazing work that's done by Miss Burgess there. How do you go about correcting students, or do you have an example of where maybe a student's used incorrect English and you've had to then correct them?
I think often when I do it, I try to do it as subtly as possible by just asking them to repeat what they've said, or even say it back to them and ask them how better they could say it. But also I think that when I first started, I did have a few instances of certain students who would speak to me in a way that wasn't appropriate in a professional setting. For example, I had a student who would always say to me, "Oh, what are you saying, miss?" every time they saw me. And I politely explained to them that's not how you speak to a member of staff, and I would like you to approach me and say, "Hello, miss, how are you?" And after a number of tries, the student did eventually say that to me. But again, it is practice, and I did feel like it was second nature to them to say it. And they also thought it was a little bit funny, but it is second nature for them to say it, and eventually they did get it, so it is just that practice.
Yeah, I certainly agree it is a lot of practice. I think one of the things that you have in the school setting is students often say, "Why me?" And what I'm trying to get at here is, if I'm the student that's corrected, how should I react? What should my thought process be if I'm the student who's then been singled out in that particular lesson and the teacher's corrected me? What should be my response?
I think my answer to that would probably be twofold, actually, because one of the things is the only way that this is going to work is if everybody buys into it. So this is kind of staff and also students thinking about that actually students have reported through the oracy survey that they know that oracy is important and that is a skill that's worth developing. Staff are then going to support them to develop that skill just like we would in any other subject. So if you wrote an essay in English and there was vocabulary you could improve in your essay, or you could express yourself in a different way, or there was elements of slang in your written form, I would absolutely be circling it, correcting it, writing a question mark next to it, getting you to rephrase it. If you were to do a practical in PE, or if you were to play an instrument in music, you would have a go the first time, your teacher would watch or would listen, would give you that verbal feedback, and then you would repeat it again, and the next time you would have improved and use that feedback to develop the way that you've done it and to develop that skill. And I guess that's what I want us to think about when it comes to the speaking. But I understand that the difference is that actually when you're talking, it feels more personal. And it feels like you are being kind of personally singled out and attacked about it. But actually, if we can change the mindset to think about the fact that this is about development, it will definitely be about the way that staff deliver it to students, and thinking about, I know that I will be thinking about the tone that I use when I correct students with what they're saying, and also accepting that I'm not going to get it right every time, and that actually there will be times where I will need to correct myself as well. And I think if we can be doing it with that environment in mind, it takes away it feeling less personal. I think also where students are asked to correct themselves, if you take away that kind of defensiveness and just have a go, again, the more people do this, it just becomes the culture of the school that students, when they haven't done it correctly first time, they have another go and then they do it correctly the second time, and obviously staff will praise for where students have done that. And I think it's also about how the other students respond. So if someone in your classroom has been asked to say it again and there are students that are laughing or making comments, that is not an environment that's conducive to improving our speaking skills, because all that will happen then is that person will feel insecure about what they've said. And let's be honest, none of us are going to get it perfectly. Everyone's going to need to develop those skills. So I think it's about trying to take away some of it that feels personal and just think of it as developing a skill like you would in your other subjects using feedback. And then for other students that are in the room at the time, providing that support and sort of going along with it as something that's developmental rather than feeling like it's something to, disrespect people about.
I think you touched upon two things which I thought were fantastic there. First, I'd like to say your answer was great. You talked about mindset and you talked about culture. I think that something that was really, really important is speaking on a personal term is English is not my first language. So when it comes to someone correcting you, it can be quite difficult, especially if that comes from a classroom setting. There's everybody there. And I suppose what you're initiating is that I'm not able to articulate myself so well. The other thing I kind of wanted to ask is, students also sometimes are in a position where they feel that they can correct somebody else. Is that something that you would encourage? And if so, in what type of environment would you encourage that to happen and take place?
So I think with regards to the first part of it, and I guess both of them kind of link together, because I've definitely seen it in my classes where people, where it might be that English isn't their first language, actually get quieter in lessons through kind of fear of communicating things, sort of incorrectly in inverted commas. But ultimately, for me, actually, it's not, English is my first language and I'm still getting things wrong and need correcting on things as well. So actually, it's something that everybody is going to be developing. And so I think it's a focus for everybody on improving how they articulate themselves. It's not something that we're necessarily born with, it's a skill we have to develop. However, obviously people's starting places might be different, but it's something that we're all going to be kind of working on together. And then students correcting each other, I guess in my head, I would love to get to a place where we are in a school environment that has that culture where students can correct each other in a way that's respectful and supportive. However, I don't think we're there yet. So for me, actually, to start off with, it is going to be about teachers correcting students and in order to develop their skills, until we're in a place where we can be in classrooms and in environments where students are able to support each other. And there are places where that could take place. I have classes where absolutely, if I said student X has used the word bad, are there any other examples of words that mean bad that we could use to support them in articulating themselves better? I know I've got classes where in a really supportive way, students would give examples, we would re-say it again and actually then move forward. And there might be some small group work outside of the classroom where also that can happen. But I think this is something that we should be aiming to build towards.
Amazing. Lastly, we almost finish off with giving some tips. Is there any tips either of you would like to give to the students when it comes to either learning how they can correct themselves? And by that I mean whether it's listening to podcasts, watching a movie, reading a book, anything particular that they can do to kind of improve the way they articulate themselves.
I mean, I guess listening to examples of good speaking is a really good starting point. One of the things that I like to show my classes are things like TED Talks, because people that do the TED Talks, they don't all speak with really sort of posh accents. They don't even all articulate themselves in the same way, but they are all passionate speakers and able to kind of stand up and deliver something. So for me, that's a really good place to start. And then obviously I'm going to plug reading, because reading improves vocabulary. It's where we kind of learn all our words that then we can use to communicate our ideas, and just practicing talking to each other, and maybe even in friendship groups, supporting each other and correcting each other in that kind of supportive friendship environment outside of the classroom.
Thank you so much for today's episode. I think I've taken a lot of things on board myself, especially when it comes to just having the right mindset, being supportive of your classmates. And I think that's something that we need to develop as a school, and that doesn't have to be student to student, but also staff lending a hand just to support you. So you are kind of in an environment which allows you to be brave enough to put your hand up. And even though you're not able to articulate yourself the first time, or sometimes even the second or the third time, because there is times when a member of staff will say to you, can you say that again? That's what we started off with. And if you're not able to, it's all right to say, can I have a moment to think about it? Because just like anything, whether you're on maths, science, it doesn't mean that within that 10 seconds, you need to come up with an answer. You need to be brave enough to take a moment to say, can I have a little think? Do I have the vocabulary to articulate myself? If you're not able to, don't shy away from the next time you're asked. All right? The next time you get asked a question, don't shy away from it. You've got to be brave, because one of the biggest things I took away from this little conversation is it's about development. So if you're looking at the development side with anything you do, you don't do it once and then you get it right. You're going to have to do it 3-4 times or 6 or 7 times before you actually even start to get to the stage where you understand it and not even master it. So thank you so much for listening, and we look forward to listening to the next episode.